So it is Friday, December 16th. It is day 296. The big story today is another massive barrage of missiles sent at Ukraine. But um, I have like 20 different articles I want to cover. And so we're going to cover that, but we're going to cover other things along the way as we try to tell the story of what's happening in Ukraine on the ground. Okay, so before that, I want to start with this. Yesterday, I surveyed and I asked how many YouTube channels in Ukraine do you watch. I was really amazed to see about half of you are watching a half dozen or more. And then there's even more that 16 or more. Wow. I mean, you guys are the hardcore. So I was just trying to understand who you guys are. Somebody was commenting, it's like, it feels like I'm sitting in class again. Well, it's occupational hazard. I'm sorry about that. That's just who I am. Okay, we're going to start here. Ukraine war, live update, new sanctions. I don't think a whole lot of sanctions, but this was really interesting. I just don't think that they're efficacious. Some people put a lot of faith in sanctions. I think you need to win on the ground. That's just the reality. The U.S. has already trained about 3,100 Ukrainian troops on how to use and maintain certain weapons like HIMARS. And that's going to be required to train more when they get Patriot systems, which they should be pretty soon. But there's more people needed to train on each Patriot system, and so that's going to have to amp up. The UK has done a really good job training 10,000 Ukrainians per month. Okay, this is a great you really need to understand this, so don't click off because I'm going to be reading about Zelenskyy talking about the borders. Just, you have to understand this to understand Zelensky's position and what has to happen and go forward, and then we'll talk about the grid after that. Why am I against freezing this war? Like, people are like, peace, peace, let's just have peace now, let's just stop it and like put a pause on it. That's the wrong approach. Why am I against freezing this war? Because in Donbass, we've already seen it. They've taken away part of the territory and then freeze it for some time to become more powerful occupiers, ready to move occupation, and that's all. Understand, we are not at war with Russia. Russia is at war with us on our territory. They have to withdraw. That's exactly right. Like, they're not invading Russia. That's not what's going on here. Russia's completely the aggressor. So he said, settling along the lines of February 23rd, which is what Henry Kissinger argued for, go back to what the borders were before February 23rd, would not be a finale. This would not be a finale because no one understands what security guarantees mean. Now, he talks about the Budapest Memorandum. I have driven that and driven that and driven that point because this is the heart of it. We had the Budapest Memorandum. I was told, do not be afraid. Everything is fine. There are no nuclear weapons, and this is the right way, and the whole world is going to be there. But the whole world has not come. As we've seen, we have given away our nuclear weapons, exchanged them for security guarantees. Did the guarantees work? No. So that's right. If Putin now withdraws to the 1991 borders, that's the borders when Ukraine became a sovereign state before Putin intervened and stole territory the first time. If Putin now withdraws to the 1991 borders, then the possible path of diplomacy will begin. That is who can turn the war from a military path to a diplomatic path. Only he can do it. Now, that's absolutely true. This next paragraph is where I disagree with Zelenskyy, but let's read it. The sooner the war ends, the sooner Russia chooses the way to recognize the tragic mistake of starting it, the longer the Russian president will secure his life and the life of his entourage. I don't think Putin will survive if he stops. I think that's the end of Putin, and Putin thinks that way, and that's why Putin has to keep going. I don't think he can survive this kind of defeat politically. He will be ousted from power, and he won't allow that to happen. But if you understand how Zelenskyy thinks, then you understand why he has to keep going. Putin feels like he has to keep going. Zelenskyy feels like he has to keep going, and that's just where we are. Okay. Now, let's turn to our headlines of the day. Russia launches missile strikes across Ukraine as Kyiv warns a possible new Moscow offensive. Now, the thing about this article was this. It wasn't about the missile strikes. It was Moscow's new offensive could happen as soon as January. General Zelenskyy and Colonel Alexander I'm not Ukrainian, guys. I can't pronounce some of these names. Were quoted as saying in the interviews in The Economist, quote, the Russians are preparing some 200,000 fresh troops. I have no doubt that they will have another go at Kyiv. Wow, that's Zelenskyy saying that. So I didn't predict that. He's predicting that. I just think it's going to be bad in the spring. Uh, it's coming. I don't think this is going to be over anytime soon. Okay, next, Ukraine adopts to power cuts, blunting Putin's attack on the energy front. Since early October, Russia has launched multiple seven large-scale missile and drone attacks of this kind. I count 9. Including what happened today. So this would be 9 now, and other sources had 8 until before today, which would be 9 as well. Russia carries out more massive strikes on Ukraine's infrastructure. Just look how, I mean, the picture just tells so much about this, doesn't it? I mean, the picture alone, just the utter darkness that they've plunged the nation into. And that's really what you need to see there. 70 rockets fired at several regions on Friday morning. Air Defense Forces appear to have caught most of the incoming rockets, claims 60 out of the 76 that were downed. But the few that got through were enough to destroy 50% of the consumption of unified energy system. It was lost. So just those 16 getting through, if those are the numbers, maybe it's a little bit more or less, whatever. But just imagine if all those rockets got through, what that would actually be like. We ask you to be understanding of the power outages and drops in water and heat supply, the state emergency services said. Let's see. First, the shipment of emergency repair equipment has already arrived from the United States. There will be, I'm sure, more to follow. Other countries are also sending stuff. And so what they're doing is they're rapidly adapting. And this is what the Ukrainians have done throughout the entire 9-10 months of the invasion, as they've adapted to whatever's come at them. And so these points of invincibility, for example, or just trying to adopt little power generations decentralized as opposed to the massive grid. They've done this the whole time. Occupants inflict at least 3 blows on Kharkiv. The invaders do not stop the terror of civilian population in Kharkiv region. The invaders have just delivered at least 3 strikes. Residents, please do not ignore the alarm. Stay in shelters. There's a direct hit on a pharmacy building. The infection disease department of a hospital was also damaged. Good work. There were no military facilities there. Now remember when I say this, there's no military facilities. I'm going to show you an article at the very end in RT where Dmitry Peskov shows how this is a military facility in his warped way of twisting definitions. Just stay with me. Okay, this is just a view of what it looks like. Some of the damage, the videos, the aftermath of the rocket attack. I'm just showing a few minutes of it, or like a few, like 30 seconds of it, 20 seconds of it, just so that you can get a sense of what that's like. It's tragic. It doesn't need to happen, and the Russians need to leave. That's really what this means, and Zelensky's right about that. Okay, now it's time for fun with Russian state media. Okay, here's Pravda, emergency power outages all across Ukraine after another rocket attack. Again, they're showing their people. See how we've plunged the Nazis into darkness? Isn't that great? Okay, due to rocket attacks on Friday, December 16th, the consumption of the United Energy System of Ukraine fell by more than 50%. This is a true statement. It's just taking from the same kind of things that I showed you. Okay, a little bit more. Russians' massive December 16th attack on Ukraine marks a new stage of a special operation. So they're calling this a new stage. Russians' recent attacks caused massive destruction. The attacks mark the beginning of a new stage of the conflict. There were more than 80 strikes. Okay, I had calculated 76 from the earlier whatever. Let's say more than 80 in all these different regions where they're attacking. But then we get down to the end here. According to military expert, a new stage has begun in the energy war, and they're calling it an energy war too. It's not just the Ukrainians, as the Russian forces have struck generating facilities, and that makes sense. But this is what I was telling you to hold on with that thought. Remember the hospital and the pharmacy and whatever? Okay, Dmitry Medvedev called these legitimate military targets. According to him, they include military facilities and any facilities related to military and civilian infrastructure, which could mean anything. I defy you to come up with anything that, based on his definition right here, cannot be a military target. So any military facilities as well as civilian infrastructure. contributing to the achievement of the military goals, in particular bridges, stations, roads, energy facilities, factories, and workshops, at least partially fulfilling military orders. So if a road is allowing them to travel somewhere, that is a military target. Even if it's on the western side of the country and there's nothing actually there, it's in Lviv, let's say. It it just it's really, I mean, a little old lady could, by this definition, become a legitimate military target. Okay, let's keep moving. I'm only going to show you the picture here because this is China and Belarus, Russia's key allies in its opposition to the USA. Again, this is Pravda, and this is the kind of thing that they want to paint for their people all the time. That, see, we've got all the power, and these guys are little, small, and weak. We're big bears, and they're just a little eagle. Okay, yeah, that's just, it's par for the course. You see it all the time. Okay, Germany is now a total dictatorship. Remember the mirror kind of thing where they tell you, they point at you and say you're doing the thing that they're doing? This is a perfect example of that. So the ongoing crisis has become a pretext to intensify the years-long crackdown on freedom of speech in the West. Really? Where are we cracking down on freedom of speech? Germany is now a total dictatorship. So what do they mean? This is what Western countries are doing since the start of the special military operation, even before that. And what are they complaining about? Germany has repeatedly targeted RT. That's right. It's hard to find RT. I think not, and it's hard to find it in the US. You can find it through Rumble if you want to watch RT. And YouTube has taken RT, or not YouTube, major providers, Comcast and others have taken RT off, and so it's hard to find. I can find it. You can find it online. You can find it through these systems. I think it's a mistake. I think you should be able to see what kind of nonsense they're spouting here so that you can see what the other side is thinking. I do not think that banning it, but think about how ludicrous this is, where they're saying this is what the Western countries are doing since the start of the special military operation. People in Russia have literally gone to jail for holding up a blank sign, blank, nothing printed on it, that said, that just said a protest, holding up a blank sign, because you can get up to 15 years for speaking against the government or the special military operation in Russia. And they're complaining about this? Really? That's their complaint? Okay, a little bit more with RT. U.S. sides with Germany and Italy in opposing anti-Nazi resolution. Okay, well, that sounds really kind of bizarre that the U.S. would be with the Nazis, but let's read a little bit further. Germany, Italy, Australia, Japan were among the 50 members of the UN General Assembly who voted against the Russian resolution to condemn the glorification of Nazism. Who would be against the glorification of Nazism? Well, the final vote on Thursday afternoon was 120 in favor and 50 opposed, with 10 abstaining. Who were the 50 opposed? Including Germany, Japan, Italy, Austria, the UK, France, Canada, Poland, Hungary, Czech, Baltic states, Switzerland, South Korea. So wait a minute, why are they lining up to defend Nazism? Well, it's not that they're defending Nazism, and I'll show you in just a moment what that is. The U.S. and Ukraine have voted against the Russian proposed resolution for years. They were the only no votes in 2021, while the 49 others had abstained, mainly on Washington's allies. Explaining the opposition after the committee debate last month, the U.S. called the resolution not a serious effort to combat Nazism, anti-Semitism, racism, or xenophobia, all of which are abhorrent and unacceptable, but rather a shameful political ploy to justify conflict in Ukraine. Okay, let's read a little bit more about that in TASS. I don't always show you TASS, but here's TASS, and this is actually quoting parts of the resolution. The resolution expresses, quote, deep concern about the glorification in any form of the Nazi movement, neo-Nazism, and former members of the Waffen-SS, and goes on, right? The document encourages the state to develop and implement national action for the elimination of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and racial intolerance, which is amazing that the Russians are saying that while they're committing genocidal acts on Ukrainians. Just amazing. The resolution, quote, expresses deep concern about the increased frequency of attempts and activities intended to desecrate or demolish monuments erected in remembrance of those who fought against Nazism. They're talking about Soviet monuments, about opposing, the Soviet statues all over Ukraine. There was an intentional de-Sovietization in Ukraine, because after the Holodomor and being oppressed by the Soviets for many years, they don't really like the Soviets anymore, and they want to wipe that out. Lenin Boulevard is no longer Lenin Boulevard. The statue of Lenin that hovered over the park, no longer there. They've removed these things, and they're removing these memorials about those who fought against Nazism. It's a ploy. It's backhanded. It's not really about Nazism. It's about removing things that were Soviet, and that's what's going on. Okay, last article. FIFA rejects Zelensky's World Cup plea. Zelenskyy is said to have offered to share a message of world peace before the game, and the officials denied him. Zelensky's actually so masterful at communications. It's really amazing. World Cup kept politics out of it, and but they're making it look like, Zelenskyy, he's not getting any, nobody's listening to him. That's the kind of thing that they want to express here with this article. Okay, that's all that I have for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine, and I'll be back tomorrow. I hope you will be.